Let's start with the basics. What are just some of the basic foundational things we don't see that we know we need to have in place for learning to happen?
So we built the ideas like clear expectations for how to enter this conversation. It's like when we talk about behaviors, so like let's assume that's intentions,
Yep.
how we feel that, how other people feel, that kind of thing, and that was kind of set up.
Absolutely. No clear expectations whatsoever. So think back to like our Minda sessions, right? MVP, movement, verbal participation. And along with clear expectations comes classroom management, right? Which is the bigger umbrella. Clearly, Patrick is having challenges with behavior management. And I tell my teachers straight up, if you can't manage your classroom, then there will be no learning taking place, period, whatsoever. But do we want to run our classroom based on rules, consequences, and narrating in our like visionary classroom? No, in a visionary classroom, we don't need that stuff. So the next comes more culture session, right? Investment. Are his students invested? No, there's a lot of reasons why. Some of it's the management, some of it's the methods. Then we can attack planning and execution. Did he really clearly plan this, or did it kind of seem like he was winging it? Was there structures in place so that students had opportunities to share, critique others? Clearly not. But then we get to the meat and potatoes of what's the major issue here, which is, of course, the what? Turn it over here. What was the disconnect? Why do students not care about this lesson? Absolutely. Do you guys hear them in the back? Students didn't care because it had absolutely nothing to do with them. Right? So think back to the Venn diagram. What's important to the culture of the teacher? What's important to the students? Huge disconnect. What would be important to the students? The students are the ones that said it out loud. What if this happened in our community? Would we even hear about it? No. Did you notice what happened as soon as that student said that? Student voices shut down, full attention, full engagement. So, at least for that part. Yeah. Yeah.
He also shut down that.
That's a great point. He shut it down because why? Absolutely. It didn't fit his agenda. It was a distractor from like his vision of his lesson. So absolutely, when he should have in fact given that student huge kudos and potentially just diverted that lesson to what was really relevant, that could have still totally driven home his objective for that lesson. Cool. So classroom management, investment, then comes planning and execution. Big part, navigating the cultural differences. So we talked a lot about being a transformational teacher. We need transformational learning experiences. This cannot happen if we do both. And again, as I reflected on my past 6 years, I feel like I've put all my eggs in this basket and very little in this basket. Whether it was me thinking that algebra would be the way to get them to reach their goals, or the pressure from administration for test scores. I know in reflecting, if I did more of the top level, I would have had a more transformational learning experience for my students. So that for me is going to be a big goal for next year. All right, as we're moving forward, this is something that Vic talked about very beginning in the session. I'm just going to highlight a real quick snapshot of what he said. Academic success. This is obviously important. These are just the basic skills our students need to be successful. We're talking basic literacy, number sense, social skills, technological skills. The cultural competence, that's maintaining some sort of cultural integrity within our students in addition to academic excellence. And then we have the critical consciousness. This is allowing our students to critique and question things that are just messed up and unfair in their lives, to again enable them to be the ones that question. What we want to do is hit all three to be CRT. Engagement drives achievement. Hooking your students into your lesson by working with content that is relevant to their lives is an amazing way to keep student engagement. Case in point was the Patrick video. We saw engagement once we saw things that were relevant to their lives. We have one last video clip. that's going to show an example of a teacher utilizing CRT effectively, and it's Mr. Fine. Right here. So as you're looking at Mr. Fine, I want you to just in the back of your heads compare and contrast what are some of the methods that he's clearly using different than Patrick.
Charter is a coalition of essential schools with a philosophy of student-centered constructivist learning. And what that basically means is we anchor the curriculum in the lived experiences of the students. It operates under a series of common principles. And one of those common principles is less is more, depth over coverage, where we really go in depth with the curriculum and we really go in depth with teaching students how to critically think. You know, my critical education started with my mother, and it wasn't until high school, when I moved here, that I met a teacher named Miss Aliyah Aziz. Walk into a room, on the upper right-hand corner of her board, it says, Ms. Aziz be trippin', contraction untrippin'. Under that, it had Africa in big, bold letters, spelled with a K. And I was like, where am I? She was teaching me about sexism. She was teaching me about racism. She was teaching me about classism. And this is the first teacher ever that gave validity to my Black English vernacular. It's important for students to feel like the class is a democratic space where they can have dialogical encounters with each other. They have to be able to share who they are beyond the confines of the classroom. Kids before content. And what that means is like you have to look at individual kids before you look at these concepts and this content, because ultimately you're not trying to dump a whole bunch of facts into students and say, here, learn these. No, you have to get to know who they are first as individuals so we can really personalize the curriculum to fit their needs. And open forum is a way for students to express and bring whatever funds of knowledge that they have, whatever talents that they have, whatever's weighing on them heavily.
I had read one of my poems to my brother and my mom about love. This is not
Keep in mind that the canon in humanities is all socially constructed, where someone's picking these texts as being the texts that we study. Why can't students actually bring their own lived experiences in the classroom for us to study? Because that's just as valuable as Ernest Hemingway or William Faulkner or Toni Morrison.
Me and my brother Carson. It was the first time I got to see him again for a month, and we took pictures.
And this is what my teaching philosophy is anchored in. It's anchored in question, question, question. Getting students to think through a series of Socratic questions so they can birth new thoughts and new understandings of the world. Socratic seminar is a way for students to have discussions. So there's an inner circle and there's an outer circle. The inner circle participates in a critical reading of a text. The outer circle is kind of like a panopticon. It's like surveillance, and they're like observing, and they're checking behaviors. Then they're giving feedback to the discussion after the inner circle is finished. But then it's also reciprocal. This dialogical encounter I was talking about with open forum continues in a very academic way, where the students are talking and I'm decentralized. They hate when I interrupt the Socratic seminar because it's their discussion. It's their space. Everyone has a chance to speak, and it's supposed to be equitable. So it moves from this very individualistic type of activity to this very communal activity where it builds these interpersonal connections and interdependence, where it's about upholding and supporting the group. It teaches them to have these critical dialogues, not just in my class, but beyond the confines of my classroom. Every single student is a teacher to me, and they teach me something new every single day. They're critical readers, they're critical writers, they're critical researchers. They're amazing.
Right. That, again, not a fair comparison to him and Patrick, but again, it's just to show an example of what CRT could look like, and also the methodology of seminar, which I heard was implemented today. Do we have a clip out there that is really nice? So we saw it there, and then the rest of you guys are already trying it in action. So going back to Patrick, I know a lot of you already started generating some concrete. That's our minute. I can't take the credit. Going back to Patrick, I just want to take a couple minutes since a lot of you already started generating concrete ideas. But if we're focusing on P&E, planning and execution, how could Patrick, from the previous video, executed his lesson with the same objective and the same kind of intent, his vision of making it applicable to the real world? How could he have done that in a more culturally responsive manner? Just take 2 minutes to get some concrete planning and execution ideas, and then we'll be able to move on to the last part of the session.